Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not,
Greetings, gentle viewers! Exorcism. A process where someone yells at someone else until they pretend to have demons driven out of them. Cathartic and very over the top, and more than a little similar to stage hypnotism, but also the basis for the extremely famous Exorcist series, a series that included the classic original, the terrible Exorcist the Heretic, the brilliant Exorcist 3, and... it also included this, a semi-big budget prequel directed by Remy Harlan, who gave the world the Deep Blue Sea, and with no Samuel L. Jackson / Sharkbait scene around to distract us from the shit. Roll it! We open on Gigantor's son, devourer of regular-sized suns, and we see some guy who seems to have wandered off the set of Valhalla Rising, the most boring Vikings versus Native Americans art house film I've ever seen. And because the film's not satisfied with reminding me of that, they have this scene, which just wants me to compare it to The Prophecy, a far better stupid film about Christianity and death. And massive pullback shot. Those shots were impressive, back when they weren't made of CGI. And look at this scene. What do you think's happened here? Because it looks to me like a battlefield, and where outside of Vlad Tepes's erotic dreams do you see people crucified upside down in the middle of a battlefield? Camden. But that's got nothing to do with this. So we're in Cairo, and I have to congratulate the director for not trying to shoehorn in as many Cairo sites as he could to try and prove that we're there. Double congratulations for having it rain and not treating the audience as the idiots who don't realise that it rains in Egypt that we actually are. But if you can't beat them, join them. Why is it raining in Egypt? So, market scenes, shisha, meat, blacksmiths, ugly locals. So far, so stereotypical. In a bar, Stellan Skarsgård waits for Ian Holm to arrive with his insect typewriter when a local beggar boy tells him a sob story about his sister.
I know your sister. She's peddling in the next bar over.
Your film has a slight problem when the wealthy Westerner looks less well-bathed than the Egyptian beggar child. So Skarsgård, who's playing Father Merrin from The Exorcist Parts 1 and 2 and is yet to grow an extra foot in height and lose about 50 pounds, meets this guy, whose main line of work appears to be that as a Jerome Crabbe lookalike. He decides that Father Merrin would be the best person to enlist to excavate a church uncovered in East Africa.
Now you think I'm a thief and a whore.
No. Simply a man who's lost faith in everything except himself.
This guy has clearly been watching Bone Kickers. The more fucked up the archaeologist, the greater treasures they will inevitably find. The man wants a tiny statue of the demon Pazuzu that he expects to find at the site. A tiny statue that is so rare that less than 30 years later, Merrin finds a massive identical version during the opening of The Exorcist. The reveal of a leather replica of the statue makes babies cry. Because subtlety is clearly not for people who directed Die Hard 2. In Nairobi, Merrin watches some British walk past in shorts and is instantly reminded of the Nazis in the snow. Just as shapes and colours remind Emmanuel of sex, everything and anything reminds Merrin of the Nazis. Inside, he meets a British major who talks about his love for capturing and killing butterflies because butterflies will clearly be involved in his eventual death. And he meets Father Personality Vacuum. He's been sent by Rome to ensure that the site is properly respected. That's a bit weird because A, why would the British give a shit what Rome thinks, and B, wouldn't the Eastern Orthodox Church have just as big a claim to it as the Catholics? So both priests are on their way to the dig site to spread the good news about sodomizing boys and stopping condom use and all that sort of stuff when they pass Mini Arlington Cemetery and are helpfully told that plague struck the valley 50 years earlier.
How many died? All of them.
Can you hear that? Can you hear it? That's the sound of tension, not building. In the camp, we run into some of the locals. The doctor, played by Isabella Scorupco, the least attractive woman in Goldeneye. And yes, I'm including Alan Cumming. This guy, who converted to Christianity, and his sons, who not only took the white man's religion, but also their accents.
Give it to me! It's mine! Was it yours? Give it to me! Mr. Merrin gave it to me.
I don't know how two boys born and raised in East Africa manage to sound so English, but they manage it. And finally this guy, an archaeologist whose face over the course of the film will become a laboratory for every disease related to leprosy that is native to the area. The archaeologist explains that progress at the dig is slow because the locals refuse to enter the church. Because superstitious African tribesman is a stereotype that just cannot die. At the dig site, we see that the filmmakers have an interesting idea about archaeology because they're digging the trenches very far from the church. Regardless of that, they've managed to uncover the roof of the church, which I personally would have expected to have caved in because of the weight of the dirt and crap on top of it, but what the fuck. Merrin uses his magic brush and within seconds works out that the church was brand new when they buried it.
It's almost as if it were buried right after it was built.
If it took him that long to figure that out, then what the fuck has the English archaeologist been doing all this time, apart from drinking and being ugly? So they spot some hyenas and it's time for a scare, so this extra freaks out at thin air and probably dies quietly off screen. I say probably because they never really mention him again. In one of the trenches, Merrin finds one of the Christian children, and luckily for the child, he's not currently a priest, so instead of handing him his cock, he hands him a trowel to play at archaeology with. Back at the camp, the doctor flirtatiously talks in non sequiturs.
So what is it you hope to find here?
Well, the answer to why a church was built here, 1,000 years before Christianity arrived.
You were a priest once, weren't you?
Now, apart from drinking and being ugly, the English archaeologist is mainly here to be racist.
Bloody savages!
Which is probably the most realistic attitude from many of the Caucasian characters, frankly. Racism wasn't the exception, it was pretty much the rule. Anyway, all that guy's got left is to be a jackass and eventually get crucified upside down. So I'm pretty much going to ignore him until he gets nailed, and then I can use my Nelson sound effect. So Merrin, Father Personality Vacuum, and this guy called Chuma enter the church through the roof and do the whole looking around thing. There they find statues, pictures, a baptismal font that does not look like it comes from 500 AD, and they start talking about things that they already know.
Lucifer, the Lord's favourite angel.
Cast out after the war in heaven. Can't even trust angels, can you?
And blackbirds, because shit archaeology is not quite enough to remind me of bone kickers, whether I want to or not. At least the episode of Bone Kickers where they pointlessly turned up in was set somewhere where they actually live. But why explain why blackbirds are there when you can just show off something that's really not a massive deal if you think about it logically?
Desecration of Christ.
Okay, upside down crucifix. Why does it have to be a desecration of Christ? St. Peter was crucified upside down because he didn't think he was good enough to be crucified like Jesus. It could be a statue of St. Peter. Even if it is Jesus, then so what? The cross looks like it was broken. It's wood. It's 1,500 years old. It broke. They were just lucky that someone decided to chain it to the ceiling. And yes, I get that the implication is supposed to be that there's a demon in here and he did that for some reason. But if a demon's been in the church and it can influence things to break them, then why couldn't he escape? If he's a Christian God-fearing demon, then why was the only thing he broke the crucifix? And why, if the demon broke that, why did he chain it to the ceiling? And if the demon broke it and chained it up there, then why couldn't he escape? Or even just knock over the baptismal font? You've got demonic powers. You could break and chain up that cross over the weekend. What exactly did you do for the other 1,500 years? Stare at it and masturbate? Of course, now's the time when people finally begin to mention that there was a head archaeologist before Merrin and he sorta went mad after entering the church. You know, the sort of thing you want to mention to someone before you offer them the job. The former head archaeologist, who's meant to be French, but kind of isn't, has been taken to a sanitarium in Nairobi, so Merrin goes to see him, in a room that might actually be big enough to have an echo. And I'm wondering, why is it decorated in Games Workshop cover artwork? Personally, I'm amused that he's played by Patrick O'Kane, who is one of the stars of Sunset Heights, an action film made in my hometown. Everyone else is amused by the pointlessness of this. Of course, I wonder why he gets his own room. And why, yet again, a mental institution is letting patients have sharp objects. And why his room is the size of a small police station. So on the way, he runs into Father Filch from Harry Potter, who senses that he's going to face danger and so discusses things of great importance. Things like this.
34 nuns had been touched by the devil committing unspeakable acts.
Well, having orgies including goats doesn't make them possessed, simply horny.
That's important to me. Basically, he hands him a copy of the Rites of Exorcism book that he just happens to carry with him at all times. He might as well carry a brick around. Of course, earlier than that, Father Merrin had some forced sexual tension with the doctor. Her use of tarot cards, her mentioning that she'd been raped by the Nazis, and her concentration camp tattoo apparently turned him on enough that later on in the film this happens between them. Even though in the earlier Exorcist films it was mentioned that Father Merrin is gay. God no like, he shoehorned in hetero love interests. Anyway, the night before, back at the camp, one of the Christian boys got chewed on by hyenas while his brother watched.
What happened?
Hyenas. They tore James apart.
Did you see that, Lancaster? The hyenas ignored Joseph.
They were focused on his brother.
That was a lot more than focused. They acted as if he wasn't even there.
They acted like you weren't there either. And so Merrin goes back to the church. Alone, of course. That way, if the roof should collapse, no one would endanger themselves coming to look for him. How considerate. Of course, he could be wondering why blackbirds are living hundreds of miles from their natural habitat. I suppose they could have been left in the church when it was buried and survived by eating satanic power, but if you spend 1,500 years in the dark, I doubt you could see. Anyway, he's investigating something that's sadly not bird-related, and the chief's wife is having a baby. Whoa! How physically impossible. And Merrin finds a statue of Pazuzu in a pit hidden inside a sarcophagus. But not just Pazuzu. Oh no. Pazuzu, who's ready to bring down his motherfucking pimp hand. Back at the hospital, there's a stupid green light that I'm assuming is coming from a disco. The ugly bastard scowls and tries to get a drink, and because there's no ghostly bartenders called Grady to help him, he ends up dead. The doctor has a shower, goes for a walk, and ends up having a seriously heavy period which he puts down to the supernatural.
It's this place, Lancaster.
Oh yes. It's bloody awful. And when Merrin and Father, destined to be killed by Pazuzu, find out that the bar has been trashed and there's blood all over the walls, it's revealed that the British Army will be coming to the area because the locals are going nuts with terror.
In my experience, bringing soldiers into a situation is always a bad idea.
Because it's a much better idea to be completely defenseless. So the British arrive, and even though it's hiding in a dark room, the Major manages to see the camera. That's weird. So seeing that the British being angry, the Africans being angry, and both having weapons may lead to people killing people, Father Merrin goes to talk to the African leader. He brings his interpreter along, even though the African leader speaks perfect English.
The evil in your church, it has taken Imeki's youngest son, and it is getting stronger.
Thus indicating that the makers don't really know what an interpreter is for. So the locals try to exorcise the boy, but because this is colonial Africa and having the locals succeed in anything comes dangerously close to being considered revolution, they don't manage to help him. But at least they get some crippling injuries to show that they tried. But getting 10 guys painted bright white past the British Army? That's stealthy. And even though hyenas have been killing people all over the place, Father Merrin spends the whole night digging up graves of plague victims and watching flashbacks to the end of the war and the Nazis killing people that he'd been forced to point out of a crowd. Because this is a serious film, damn it, with layers. Layers! Anyway, the graves are empty, and this means that Father Redshirt needs to suffer.
They're empty.
What?
We dug up 3 graves. They were all empty. What happened here?
I don't know.
Oh, yes, you do.
Makes perfect sense. Why Merrin blames Father Expendable, I don't know. He seems to think that empty graves automatically means that the Catholics are conspiring. Well, yeah, they are in this case, and they did bury empty graves. And I realise that today the automatic reaction to seeing a Catholic priest is to assume he's involved in some sort of a conspiracy. But this was set in the 40s. Anyway, what happened back at the start of the film is that there was a battle between a Christian army and an army of evil. Then the Christians killed each other, and the only survivor was a priest, who was ordered by the Roman Emperor to build a church and to bury it to seal the evil inside forever. Okay. How did it remain sealed? No, I'm serious. Fancy buildings with structures underground that are sealed but are known about by locals always end up broken into and ransacked. Even superstitious people will eventually just think, fuck it, I might as well die rich. Anyway, eventually some priests came along and they sort of vanished with all the locals. They all vanished before they found the church. Why is this thing useful, and why did it kill everyone before the priests arrived? Stupid movie. So because everyone vanished, the Catholic Church decided to bury empty graves for some reason. Anyway, the rest of the scene is pretty much, evil is here! Fuck off! God has a plan! No, seriously, fuck off. You must believe! If you don't fuck off, I'm gonna shove your rosary so far up your ass you'll think you're Padre Pio. Thankfully, the scene is interrupted before either side can do a Godwin and therefore turn it into a near-perfect replica of an atheism-theism debate online. It's interrupted because someone managed to find the ugly bastard's body hung up in the church. Because... subtle. This I don't get. Who found him? Because the only people I can remember willingly going into the church were Merrin, Father Irritating, and the interpreter. Unless the interpreter found him, but why would you send the only guy who's on location who'll actually go into the place on a fucking errand?
Found Jeffries.
Get him done.
Anyway, this leads to the Major going insane, faster than Jack Nicholson in... anything starring Jack Nicholson. Of course the Africans deliberately stop Merrin, a man who they've met before, but they don't stop the new guy from getting right up to the chief and shooting him in the head. Because bodyguards, what the fuck are they? Anyway, it's time for a British person to be confronted by a swarm of zombie butterflies that can't possibly hurt him. I'm so glad he was in the film. He was so important and all. So father, soon to be dead, puts the boy into a jeep and takes him into the church, because that's one place the Africans won't go. Brilliant! Except you've got to go through their lands to get to the church. I guess the old saying is true. Africans don't fuck with Catholics in jeeps. So here we go, 80 minutes in, an exorcism, in an Exorcist film. This better be good. Well, no, apparently we haven't sat through quite enough story yet, because Merrin's just broken into the doctor's room and discovered that it's actually she that's possessed, not the boy. Although if I saw that room, I don't think my first thought would be possessed. And how does she do her hair and makeup so immaculately in there? And you know what? This makes all those little bits where she's scared and there's no one around but the camera make perfect sense. Oh, wait. Maybe she's breaking the fourth wall and this is actually genius. Oh, fuck it. When something can either be genius or retarded, always better than retarded. Now we know who's actually possessed. Can we please have an exorcism scene? Of course not, because there's Deadliest Warrior, the movie, to watch. Winston Churchill versus Shaka Zulu. Who is deadliest? The submachine gun versus the spear. The Webley pistol versus the wicker shield. The Gatling gun versus a willingness to throw oneself on a Gatling gun. Who is deadliest? So eventually, using his stealth Catholic powers, Father Merrin makes it into the church, and after a quick rediscovering his faith scene that the makers have left behind should be forced to watch on a loop and be forced to take notes about, he finally begins to exorcise the doctor. Of course, this contradicts The Exorcist 1 and 2, which stated that the only other time Merrin had fought Pazuzu, he was inhabiting the body of a small African boy, not a 35-year-old Swedish woman. That's about as far removed as you can get! So yeah, The Exorcism. Kinda like if the original was directed by someone with a hard-on for wire fu, unnecessary jumping around, and pointless CGI. Oh fuck, this is the Star Wars prequels of Exorcist movies. Still, I'm aware I'm setting myself up for a fall with this, but I'm sure they can't have fucked the voice up that much.
What's the matter, Merrin? Don't you want to fuck me anymore?
Whoever's doing that, Mercedes McCambridge, you are not. So yeah, evil laugh, holy headbutt, fourth shove, walking around, visions of Narnia, pointless jump scare, crawling through a massive cave complex that was somehow hidden underneath the church, CGI tongue, dry humping, spider walk climbing, and finally, whatever the fuck is supposed to be going on here.
By our Lord Jesus Christ, God the Holy Ghost commands you!
No! I, Ray, and Vigo shall rule the earth! Be gone, you pitiful half-men!
I cast you out!
For a few seconds I was hopeful that they'd taken the somewhat interesting route and had her killed by the experience. But no, she lives. At least until this happens.
Help!
If the demon has the power to melt people's brains from hell, then why is this the only time that it's done it? This is kind of like doing a prequel to Candyman that reveals in its finale that he always had the power to turn people on another continent into ice cream. It's only slightly less silly because Candyman has no need to turn people on another continent into ice cream in his other films, while Pazuzu would have benefited greatly from melting people's brains all throughout the films he appeared in. Plus, Candyman already has powers connected to a sweet foodstuff. So they escape, and because Merrin realizes that a Catholic priest traveling alone with a small African boy might get the wrong sort of press, I'm assuming he drops him off somewhere over the Mediterranean, and goes to Rome, where we don't discover what this guy's deal is. And then we see that Merrin's a priest again, and most importantly we find out that they couldn't afford to shoot at the Vatican, or get a decent green screen. And that's that. Exorcist the beginning. I assume he kept walking and walking and walking until he turned into Max von Sydow and found that house in the fog in the original. This was terrible. Frankly, not as bad as The Exorcist 2, but that's because the guy who made this also made The Deep Blue Sea, while the guy who made Exorcist 2 also made Zardoz. Still, Skarsgård was fine, even though he was about as far as you could get from Max von Sydow and stay the same sex, ethnicity, and species. This was a huge missed opportunity. If only there was another Exorcist prequel, a good Exorcist prequel, but that can only happen in a parallel universe. Did you know that The Exorcist had a good prequel? And I love it.
Shut the fuck up.
Yes, sir.